Hello, everybody. And after a few days of pause, we'll do another chapter of the dear old Briar Patch today. Finally. Sorry for the big delay, everybody. Things have been a little bit hectic and busy around here. So, hello to Jackson, Matthew, Marjorie, and Emma here in Maine, to Malia and Lucas in Missouri, and Kai Ming and Ru Kai in Washington State, to Hope here in Maine. Hi, Hope. And to Dylan and Lucas in Maine, to our friends Leslie and Mary way over in England, way across the North Atlantic, to Ezzy and Indy in Oklahoma, to Kayla here in Maine, and to Sylvia, Macy, and Lillian in Maine, to Happer and Judson in Maine, to Caden and Xander here in Maine, and Evangeline and Isaac up in Rhode Island, and Mabel in the country of China. Hello to Oliver, Madeline, and Wyatt out west, and to Alex here in Maine, up along the Penobscot River. Okay, everybody, Chapter 5, Something on Her Mind. And that looks like little Mrs. Peter right there. Little Mrs. Peter Rabbit, huh? Okay. It seemed to Peter Rabbit that Mrs. Peter was not quite her usual self these early summer days. Yet when he thought about it, he couldn't say just what it was or wasn't that gave him that feeling. As a rule, he pays her a little attention, just takes her for granted, and rarely notices what she does or doesn't do. Probably this is because he is so used to having her around. People who have lived together for as long as Peter and Mrs. Peter have in the dear old Briar Patch often get that way. That clock over my shoulder. She had never been one to put herself forward. She was shy and retiring and always had tried to keep out of sight of visitors to the old Briar Patch. But now there were times when Peter had a feeling she was trying to keep out of even his sight. Then, too, he now and then found her staring off in the distance at nothing in particular. He would have to speak twice before she would notice him. "Aren't you feeling well?" he asked her one of these times. "I never felt better in my life." "Why?" replied little Mrs. Peter. "Oh, nothing," said Peter. "Let's go and get some sweet clover." Excuse me. So they went to a bed of sweet clover a very little way from the old Briar Patch, and there, in stuffing himself, Peter forgot Mrs. Peter for his time being. Excuse me, folks. Roshi, could you bring me a sip of water in a minute? Something caught in my throat, I think. When he did think to look at her, she was sitting with that same faraway look in her soft eyes, staring off across the green meadows instead of eating. Nights Peter found it easier than usual to slip away to the green forest or the old pasture, or to visit the smiling pool, without protest from her. Indeed, she gave little, if any, attention to what he did. And after one of his trips, she would greet him as if he had been no further than the nearest patch of clover. Thank you. Thank you very much, Roxy. There. And a cup of tea. Wow. Let's see now. Where was I? This was not like Mrs. Peter. No, sir. This was not at all like her. Such news as he brought appeared to be of no interest to her, unless it happened to be something about Reddy Fox or Mrs. Reddy. Then she would listen, but only for a minute or two, before that faraway look would return to her eyes, and Peter would have the feeling that she didn't hear a word he was saying. Also, she was more uneasy than usual. So it seemed to Peter anyway. She moved about much more than was her custom. It seemed to him that she looked over every inch of the dear old Briar Patch, especially around the edges of it. Several times he discovered her some distance out on the green meadows, and in so far as he could see, she wasn't looking for sweet clover or anything else to eat. Once, when she returned from one of these short trips, he asked her what she was doing out there. "Oh, just looking around," she replied. "What for?" Peter demanded bluntly. "Just to see how things look," was her vague reply, and off she hopped to another part of the dear old briar patch. The way she acts is queer, muttered Peter. Yes, sir, she is acting in a queer way. It is as if she had something on her mind. I don't understand it. How near the truth he was, Peter didn't guess. Mrs. Peter did have something on her mind. It was a very important something, the most important something in all the world. At least she thought so. What was it? Why, she was planning a nursery, and just where to have it. Yes, sir, that is what she was doing, and you must admit that this was important, very important. Of course, that nursery must be where it would be safest, least likely to be found by hungry folk with a taste for baby rabbits. So you see, she really did have something on her mind. But though Peter suspected this, he couldn't find out what it was. When he asked questions, she just put him off with evasive answers, or changed the subject, or pretended not to hear him. You see, what she was thinking about and planning was a secret. Such a precious secret she didn't dare tell Peter, even though she wanted to. There was only one way, just one way to keep a secret. That's to keep it to oneself, she said to herself. I would like to tell Peter. I just longed to. He would mean to keep it a secret. He wouldn't for the world give it away, knowingly. But he might let something slip that would give it away, or he might do something that would make others suspect it. A secret shared with no one is hard enough to keep. When it is known by two, it's twice as hard to keep. When more than two know it, it is no secret at all. So Mrs. Peter didn't tell Peter what she was planning to do. After a lot of looking around and studying what she found, she watched for a chance when Peter was away and no one else was about to hear her. I'm sorry, folks, no one else was about to see her. Then she left the dear old briar patch and went quite a distance out on the green meadows. There, where the grass was high, there was no sweet clover. She began to dig away the grass roots. She had begun a new nursery, which she would try to keep a precious secret as long as it would be needed. No one will ever think to look way out here on the green meadows for babies of mine, thought she as she worked. No, sir, they never will. If it is suspected that I have babies, they will be looked for in the dear old briar patch. Everyone knows that is where Peter and I live. That is where they will expect our babies to be born. No one will ever think of looking way out here for my nursery, not even Peter. When he is looking for clover, he won't come here because he knows there is no clover here. So he isn't likely to find my secret by accident. He certainly won't find it any other way. She was not digging a deep hole like the holes Johnny Chuck digs. What she was scooping out really wasn't a hole at all. It was just a little hollow about 5 inches deep, about as wide, and only a little longer. It was only a little deeper than the roots of the grass. Polly Chuck and Mrs. Skunk have their nurseries deep in the ground, mused Mrs. Peter. I wouldn't like that. No, sir, I wouldn't like that at all. A hole isn't easily hidden. I wouldn't feel that my babies were at all safe in such a place. I'd be worried half to death all the time. I suppose Polly Chuck feels that she can fight well enough to keep out almost any enemy likely to find the hole and try to get in. Probably she can, for Chucks are good fighters. Certainly Mrs. Skunk has nothing to fear. No one is going into the hole after her babies, but I can't fight. What is more, I never feel comfortable down in the ground. I always feel trapped. And I don't think it's a proper place for little babies. They should have sunshine. Anyway, mine should. Out here they will get it. It'll keep them warm through the day when I cannot be with them. I suppose some people would say I am crazy to make this nursery right out in the open like this, but I think it's the safest place to be found anywhere. It is safe because no one will think to look for it out here. She kept looking to be sure no one was watching her as she worked. It was night, for that was the safest time for her to be so far away from the dear, safe old briar patch. She was working by starlight. She worked fast. She scooped out the little hollow, and when it was suited her, she lined it with the grass and grass roots, and, what do you think? Soft fur from her own coat. Yes, sir, she used her own soft fur. With her teeth, she pulled little tufts of it from her breast. Didn't it hurt? Seems to me it must have. If it did, that made no difference. She wanted that bed to be soft and comfortable for the wee, helpless babies that were to occupy it. And she put a lot of loving care into making it so. She didn't do all the work at once. She did it a little at a time, and she was anxious and nervous while doing it, too much so to stay long at a time. Every minute or two, she sat up to look and listen. When at last it was finished to suit her, she was sure that no one knew her secret, not even Peter. Perhaps you can see why it was too precious a secret to share even with him. She has something on her mind, thought Peter more than once, then gave the matter no further thought. And that's the end of chapter 5. The next chapter is entitled, Was Mrs. Peter Crazy? That looks like Blackie the Crow up there, doesn't it? I think it is. Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. See you next time.